Hello, everyone, and welcome to Maine Contain Fishing Podcast with Binion Outdoors, Mike, and myself, Daniel. So, for all my Facebook users, make sure you go over to Facebook and allow it to accept you on StreamYard so we can see your comment as yourself. So, tonight's show is an over and under. If none of the peeps know over and under stuff, we're going to talk about overrated baits versus underrated baits in the bass fishing world. So, how you doing tonight, Mike?
Not too bad. Trying a different camera angle here, and I kind of like it. Sorry, that's why I'm like looking at the wrong spot because my camera's normally up here.
You're good. Are you going to stream on your channel?
Oh yeah, might want to hit my button, huh? Dude, I'm so bad.
So we've got it going over on YouTube, both channels on YouTube, Twitch, and the Southeast Georgia Kayak Bass Fishing Group. So, with that being said, we're just going to talk some bass fishing until we get some peeps in here and get some people rolling and people asking questions. It should be streaming, Tim. It should be streaming on YouTube.
Did it not show up on your channel?
Let me see right quick. Yeah, it's going live on the channel.
Gotcha.
Yo, that's under you, Mike. So.
Yeah, it's probably for me. Yeah. What the hell is that?
I don't know. That's a bot. I have no idea. Somebody from Twitch. Good old bots, bot world.
I actually thought about doing Twitch streaming, but from what I found, like Alex does his on there, he doesn't get much views. And if Alex Rudd isn't getting a lot of views on Twitch, I don't think it's worth being outdoors doing it because we're not. I mean, I'm not at Alex Rudd level for sure.
I wish there was some way to stream live on Instagram and without doing that you could use a streaming app on Instagram.
Yep. Instagram would be nice.
Yeah. So, but yeah, when me and Mike was off stage earlier, we were talking about starting a Northeast series for his group up there, just because them boys up north can't compete with us boys down south as far as fish size.
Y'all got a different growing season, man. Our fish right now are in hibernation mode till March. So
yeah. So when will the water start getting back right for fishermen on the north side?
To be completely safe, if you were going to do like a monthly, it would be May to guarantee that you're going to have open water.
So May,
usually
June,
around
July,
Mother's.
August,
yeah, usually it's May through like September, and then if you want to do like October, you could. If I was going to run a tournament series, I would avoid October because what happens is you get the good old boys heading in the woods deer hunt, and then you're going to lose half of your. I mean, so you could do like May through September.
Okay.
And do a season like that. So, I start fishing in March, but that's if I can find open water. So, it depends on the year. You know, some years we have ice right until Mother's Day.
Oh, wow.
And then other years, like last year, we didn't get ice ever. There was guys out there fishing for smallies on Champlain, dude, in January. And like 20 below zero, but it never really got cold consistently long enough to do it. But we'll definitely talk about it. Maybe we'll even do that as a topic on one of the shows, and talk about the rules and all that again. I know we kind of went over it a little bit. We could introduce it because I wouldn't mind that. I always liked doing, like, I did KBF monthlies, but because it's limited to just Vermont, we would get 4 people.
Right.
So I would want to encompass Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, even Rhode Island, honestly. Like pretty much everything from upstate New York up would work. Maybe even include like Jersey, just because like mainstream fishing and those guys, like, they fish Jersey in that area too. You get there's fish in Jersey, but you're not getting, unless you're fishing Mike Iaconelli's private pond, you're not getting 10 pounders. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's
Yeah,
like,
certainly.
because up here, like, dude, that's the thing, is like, that's why I always like doing those nationwides, but it's also frustrating because, to be fair, like, our state record is a 10 pounder. Like, that's the state record. Like, that's not a, that's not an average, like OHIV average. You know what I mean? Like, you catch a 10 pounder, you literally are in the record books here. Not, oh, that's another 10 pounder. Like, that's, 8-9 pounds is like you're got bragging rights for the whole summer.
Yeah.
So, and especially with kayak, I mean, we do have weird fish too because we have smallmouth, so we do get length. You'll get a 22-inch smallmouth that's only 3.5 pounds.
Right.
But it's definitely something to talk about for sure. We can look into that.
So let's kick off the first bait tonight, Mike.
Okay.
What's your most underrated bait that you think?
The most underrated bait, I think. So, okay, yeah, this is actually an interesting one, that it's a forgotten bait. So, speaking of cold water in the beginning of the year, the most underrated bait for bass fishing is the inline spinner, like a Mepps spinner or any rooster tail, any of those. A lot of people think that they're only for trout. So I'm going with it's underrated for bass fishing, for example, because a lot of people think that that's only a trout bait.
Right.
But if you fish like Mepps size, like 4 and bigger in the spring, they will annihilate those things. And no one really uses them anymore. Like, everybody forgets about them. And Walmart has them. Every tackle store has them, but everybody thinks that they're only for trout and walleye and like different type, like pike if you get the big ones.
Yeah.
But if you fish those, like, I think that's one of the things I do in the spring every year is I throw the Mepps Fire Tiger, inline spinner a lot, and I catch a lot of big. Like, I've caught 4 pounders on a little tiny inline spinner.
Yeah, so we used to use them as kids a lot for redfin pike, these small creeks when we were kids. We'd wade the creek and throw them on little Zebco 33s and catch redfin pike about, no lie, the redfin pike are about this big. I think the state record down here is like 1.5 pounds.
Okay, yep.
So really, the way my grandmama used to cook them, just cut the head off, you cut them, and you just fry them whole and eat whole fish, bones and everything, because it had so many small bones in it that you couldn't sit there and try to pick every small. So you just fry them hard and you eat them like a cookie.
Yep.
So,
but yeah, it's one of those baits that everybody forgot about. It was just like some guys still use them, but a lot of people don't, and they think they're only for a specific species.
Yeah. So probably my underrated most bait would be the Brokeback Rebel. It is silver and black. Okay. Made by some people call it Rapala.
Yeah.
But it's a brokeback. It's got a jointed and
okay. Yep. I know what you mean now. Yeah, looking at that. We were actually using those. Speaking of fishing early, that's one of the things I was trolling for Lakers. I was using those on Lake Champlain, trolling for Lakers with those.
Yeah,
because they have a little bit more wobble to them when they're retrieved.
and they float. And
Yep.
we used to we fish them in the river a lot down here because you can throw that thing up there and it'll float, and you just twitch it a couple times. And
Yep.
if the bass is there, he's going to hit it, or jackfish or whatever. But yeah, that's probably my most underrated bait
Okay.
in my head. So
now, out of curiosity too, is there colors that are better than others in that?
because
I'm looking, they have pretty much everything. It looks
yeah.
like.
I just use that black back, silver bottom.
Yep.
That's just
Makes sense.
That's just the color that we use a lot down here in the rivers, and then
that would work here too because we have shiners, so kind of that same type of profile.
Yeah. So let me throw a question out to everybody. If you have a question of your most underrated bait, throw it up in the comments and we'll get to it. Just throw it up in the comments and we'll get to it. If you can think of your most underrated bass bait that you think that bass fishermen should still be using today.
The funny part is a lot of them are always like OG baits because everybody finds something sexy that's like new that replaces that category.
Yeah, the hula popper. Remember the hula poppers?
Yep. My mom actually the other day, she was like, she found a bunch because they had like, I don't remember where she bought them, yard sale or something, and she's like, "Are these good?" I'm like, "Yeah."
Yeah. Golly, I wish I had my grandfather's old tackle box here. I could really bring out some old school OG
Dude,
stuff.
What's crazy about that too is like, so when I was a kid, like my dad still has a lot of them, but like the OG Rapalas and like the OG stuff like that, like dudes pay a lot of money for those now. Like stuff that was just sitting in your dad's tackle box getting rusty that he never threw is stuff that like people will pay a mint for on eBay because they're like just these OG baits.
Yeah, it's golly, what was another OG? The old Creek Chugs.
Yep.
Who made the old Creek Chug?
I know what you mean. I haven't actually seen one in person, but I know I've seen the actual videos of them being used.
I'll draw it on a piece of paper right here. So the front of it kind of looked weird because it had like a triangle front. So you can see that's the way it used to. It had like that triangle front right there, right there. And then the top of the bait came over and the bottom of the bait came over. It was kind of, and they were made out of wood, like pine wood or balsa wood.
I'd say mostly balsa, probably. Yeah.
But yeah, it's looks
like you got a few in the chat there.
Yeah, Storm made another one. The Rattling Thin Fin.
Okay.
Look that up right quick, Mike, and you'll see what I'm talking about. It was black. It was black with silver body. You can buy them in chrome.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those had like a weird blade too, like a metal blade or something in them, didn't they, or something like that? I've seen those before.
I don't know.
Like the bill was like a different material almost.
Yeah.
Like.
But yeah, the Storm company made them.
Storm makes a lot of like the whole company, if you want to do overrated, underrated, honestly, Storm is underrated. They make a lot of really cool stuff.
They do.
That people don't know about. Like they have the like speaking of OG baits, but they kind of brought back the Wigglewort.
Yes.
And they have like their version of what the Wigglewort used to be, because the original Wiggleworts is one of those baits that like if you have an OG one, you're gonna make a ton of money because people will buy them. But Storm made one, and it's really cool because it's such a small bait, but those things dive like 8 feet, but they're like this big. So like you're talking like a size of a 1.5 square bill that dives to 8 feet because of the way they did the bill and the shape of it. So it was really cool for me, like as a smallmouth, because I'm fishing a lot of smallmouth, they need that smaller profile, but I can get down there because a lot of your deep diving crankbaits are freaking huge. Like a 6XD or whatever is like too big.
That thing's like a 6XD is probably, along with the build to the back hook, is huge,
4 or 5 inches at least. So
and you got to
where these wiggle worts are small, and you gotta use like a 8-speed reel, and you're like bombing it out and like just rolling that thing.
That's right. So, Bass Patrol Nation, that's the Gambler Flapping Shad. I've heard of the Gambler. I think Gambler is a company, right?
Gambler is they do plastics mostly. Yeah. They do have a few things. They're more in Florida. They're headquartered in Florida. I do a little bit of stuff with Gambler, so I actually did some pictures and stuff for them. But actually I've got some stuff around here from them. But the Flapping Shad's kind of like a fluke with a beaver tail. I guess it's kind of the easiest way to word it. So think of a fluke body with then like a long flat tail on the end of it.
Flapping Shad. Oh, okay.
They actually work really good as a chatterbait trailer because the tail just kind of, it doesn't like distort the action of the bait.
Right.
I've used them as like a chatterbait trailer, or you could Texas rig them too.
It's pretty. If you made that into a 4-inch, you could probably use that on a drop shot.
Yeah, if you made a small, Yep. Yeah, it's almost like you could see you could definitely use it as that. Yeah, it's like I said. I mean, it's like basically the front half of a fluke with like a whippy tail, and then it's got a flat paddle on the back.
So I guess it gives it more.
It makes it. It actually does. In my experience, it doesn't like swim like a Keitech, but it like just gives it a little bit bigger profile. Oh, if you're speed trolling them, so Bass Patrol said they're speed patrol. So if you speed troll them behind a boat, that would definitely,
Yeah. So Kevin, on his underrated, Kevin Spivey said Bomber was always underrated.
Bomber always reminded me of like Storm too. Like Bomber lures are kind of, they're like a cross between like Storm and Bandit.
Yeah.
But they have a lot of stuff that's very similar to
Strike
shape
King.
Of a lot of Strike King stuff, and they're kind of like an off-brand. They actually make. I was using. What did I have? I had a square bill from them that did really, really well. It was a smaller size square bill, and it had pretty good action on the water. I've definitely used their stuff before.
Yeah.
We're just sitting here Googling baits now at this point because
I got to look at them. There's so many. There's 50 million zillion trillion of them out there anymore.
Yeah, so many bait companies now, and there's only slight differences from one to another.
Yeah. So Bass Patrol Nation said, is that Arbor Gas Jitterbug or the Arbor? I'd have to look that one up. I know what the Jitterbug looked like, but
that's what it is. At least that's what it's. Apparently, that must be the brand that made it.
Maybe so. Yeah. That was the brand that made it. Yep.
Yeah. Though those are freaking OG as OG gets, man. That's before you had the Poppin' Frog and the freaking wake baits. This is what filled that need back then.
Yeah.
I think everybody's dad had one of these growing up. Usually the black one for whatever reason.
Yeah, I think my dad had one in his, but it was more like a frog color.
They made one that looked a lot like a they had so up here in Vermont, because we have perch as our primary forage, you'd get a lot of guys that would use like a chartreuse. They're big a chartreuse in black.
Yeah.
But yeah, there was definitely, my mom actually got an efficient recently, and she pulled some of these out of my dad's box and started using them. But of course, she's trying to use them over grass, and they're just caught in grass.
Dang.
I could see where those would still work, though, for sure.
Kevin said he still uses a jitterbug. I bet I'm gonna have to find me some of these OG baits and just make me an OG box.
You should, dude.
Yeah, I've got to. And do
that actually, now I think about it, that might not be a bad idea. That might be a good video idea for me, for my content, for my channel too, because just, like, take a day, half a day, and just fish
just like OG stuff,
old floating Rapalas and jitterbugs, and find some old balsa baits and stuff like that. And
God, what other, like some of them old school guys like Roland Martin? I bet you if you dug through his garage, you could find some.
Problem is, guys like Roland Martin probably got like prototypes and never even made it to the market.
Yeah, probably sitting at the bottom of a box somewhere that's worth like $1 million.
Yeah, like stuff that was like prototypes that you can't even get, colors that never existed.
Yeah, but I'll tell you another underrated bait, in like I showed you earlier. This is a scrounger head made by Pulse Lures. Yeah. So I added the skirt. If you noticed if you took the skirt off, this is what the original.
Yeah.
This is.
I'm gonna try that, dude. I never thought to use a skirt on a scrounger head. Now I might try that, because in the springtime I have a lot of success with chatterbaits and swim jigs, and that's kind of like the hybrid between
the hybrid. Two. Yeah. So just rubber flap here.
Yep.
Yeah. So
it kind of gets the, for those of you who are listening on a podcast, so scrounger head is basically, think of a swim jig head with a square bill attached to the top of it, essentially, but the bill is actually floppy. And what that does is it creates that hunting action that a chatterbait has, but it doesn't have the vibration that you're getting from a metal blade. So it's like basically the equivalent of a silent chatterbait is how it essentially works. It just creates a weird darting action. It makes an erratic, makes that bait kind of hunt and move around a lot more.
So Tim Williams is with Death Dealer Baits. See how thin that? It's real thin. You need to make a mold, man.
What is that? Is that a? What is that bait?
Yeah, let me get them out.
Kind of almost looks like the Damiki shad or whatever, but
yeah, that's. I think they were originally made for like a Damiki. See, they got
a lot of a lot of guys do. Yeah, a lot of guys use like a Damiki bait on like a trailer now.
Yeah, so that's. If you can see that this head. This head's more of an what they call an albino shad.
Okay.
And this is the blue shad.
Now, when you fish those, do you have, because I haven't had a ton of success with them, do you have to like slow roll those?
You can slow roll. They don't what I usually do is I just bomb them. I'm throwing them on a medium cranking rod, and I'm bombing them.
Okay.
And I'll wait till it hits the bottom, and I'll start just slow rolling it.
Slow rolling it. Okay.
And you can,
because I felt like I was reeling them too fast, and it kept rolling over on me. Yeah. And I think it might have been because I was also using a paddle tail, but that's a good point. Is I could use like a. Actually, I could use that bait that we were just talking about. That flapping shad would probably work too on that.
Yeah. So this is what they call the albino. It's real thin. It almost looks like a minnow, but the tail forks out.
It's got a forked tail on it. Yeah.
But it's real thin. They throw these things on the Tennessee River.
Yep.
What's the guy's name on YouTube? Big, hefty guy. Bass. Crap. He's from around that area. He had a video on him throwing them off the ledges.
You talking about Bass Quest? Talking about Caleb?
No.
Because I know he used to do a bunch of videos back in the day.
Yeah. Hank is his first name.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's an interesting dude. I gotta try those. Like, that's what I've got to figure out more of. Is, to be honest, I'm very limited on my trailer selection.
Right.
When I run my baits, I don't have a lot of selection on trailers, and I think that's what was killing me this year. Is I was like throwing it and it didn't work, and I just didn't try anything different. And I sometimes, as weird as it is, like I throw a lot of Fluke Juniors as trailers on my chatterbaits and stuff just to get a bigger profile, but no effect to the blade. But other than that, I'd never really use. I use an upside down paddle tail so it doesn't flip the blade out, and I need to start like experimenting with some other style of trailers because I feel like I could definitely get more versatility out of baits if I figure out which ones work good.
Right. So Bass Patrol Nation, I didn't catch what you were saying about they still sell them at Walmart. The jitterbug, I think that's
probably the jitterbugs. I think I've seen them at Walmart. The jitterbugs, yeah.
That's my next project. I'm gonna make an old school box and do some get me an old bait caster. If I can find me an old bait caster that the big reel,
yeah, like the what was it? Abu Garcia used to make them, dude.
Yeah.
I think Daiwa made them too. But yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah. Like, actually, you know what's funny is those reels are still available because a lot of the catfish guys use them.
That's right. Yep.
They use those. Yeah. It's like if you Google like bait casting for catfish, it's the old school bait cast reel is what it is. It's like a cross between like a downrigger reel and the modern bait cast reel.
Yeah. That's true ones you had to keep your thumb on, or you would just
you're gonna blow those up. Yeah. And back then too, of course, it's also different because back then you were just running mono.
That's right.
You weren't there was no such thing as fluorocarbon or braid.
Yeah.
You were running Berkeley Bait Game is what you were running on those. And it would poof. Dude, I got a reel. I should show you. I gotta bring them inside.
Yeah.
I got a reel in my shed right now, dude. I blew that thing up. I casted that thing, and line was coming out of the reel. I'm gonna have to literally cut out that bird's nest.
Hey Tim, I will definitely send you one so you can look at it. See what you can do. Because I'd be highly interested in some of them.
See, I'm thinking about because I'm actually thinking about doing like a bait making series this winter because I have a small shed and I have the microwave and stuff out there to make baits with, and I actually saw like a guy online was making videos about taking like existing baits and pouring a silicone mold over top of them to make your own like molds. And I kind of want to try it because basically you're making an open pour mold at that point.
Right.
But I'd be interested to see if I could make if I could make my own version of like some of these baits, because I eventually would be cool to because I'd see a lot of these guys are making them out of clay and everything else. Like, yeah, it'd be interesting to see if you could make a design that actually catches fish.
So I've been holding this thing in my hand for quite a while, Mike, this bait. And this was probably the most overrated bait today. I'm going to tell you the most overrated bait today.
Okay.
And we refer to it as many names.
You know what's funny though? It's a great point, dude.
This thing is referred to as a Cinco, a stick bait, a
stick worm,
Yeah,
Yep.
But it's overrated. But you know what? I still catch fish on them.
What's funny about that too is, and this is something that kind of going on the same topic of like baits in general, is what does that look like?
It looks like
have you ever seen an earthworm in the lake though?
Yeah.
I've never seen an earthworm in a lake.
Me neither.
So it's like, what are we mimicking with that? But yet bass eat the crap out of them. It's something that always baffled me about that. It was, like, dude, that's hands down, every bass fisherman that's worth the salt has those.
And these are all made by Tim Williams, everybody in the chat. From Death Dealer Baits, but there you go.
Yeah, I've got some of those.
Yeah.
Those are the ones you sent me. I've got some of that. I like that color a lot, actually.
I hadn't even thrown it yet. I still got like 4 or 5 in my box. I might wacky rig some of these this year during the spring and just
see that color right there. You could wacky rig it, but I bet you could also Carolina rig it and drag them because they have that earthworm color to them, and if you drag them, that's going to be like an earthworm across the bottom.
Right. But I'm gonna show you the difference in between some of them. This is made by Big Bite Baits. Let me get it on camera here, and kind of see how small it is compared to Tim. Tim's got a bigger
Tim's giving you that. They're a little bit more beefy.
Yeah.
They feel like they're more. The plastic, I noticed too. It feels like, I don't want to say it's like a Lastech, but it seems like a hybrid between like a cheaper stick worm and a more long-lasting one. Like it seems like there's a little bit more sturdiness to them. They're not just gonna rip as soon as they get hit.
Yeah,
that's one thing I liked about them is when I fished them, I noticed that like I wasn't ripping them out like if I got a wacky rig and a bluegill grabbed on the tail and yanked on it, I didn't lose the bait like I do with some other baits.
Yeah, it's I just I just like a bigger profile. I guess I'm just a bigger profile type guy when I'm fishing worms or any type of plastic. I like a beefier. So when the fish bite down on it, they feel like they're getting a meal and they hang on to it.
So I think on the same note of an overrated, underrated category, what I'm going to do is prevent myself from ever getting a sponsorship from this company because I've said this on the internet a lot. I think Yamamoto Senkos are overrated. I don't think you need to spend $9 a package on a stick worm when you can go to a guy like Death Dealer Baits and get just as good of a bait, or you can buy, if you want to buy store brand, you can buy Yum Dingers, or you can buy Big Bite baits. Like, I don't personally think, in my experience, and again, fishing is an anecdotal thing, and I've said it a million times, you can be on the same boat with the same rod and reel, with the same bait next to the guy using the exact same setup, and you're going to catch more fish than they do. But at the end of the day, a bait that is going to get destroyed, first of all, because by nature, whether you're Texas rigging it, wacky rigging it, I don't care how you're rigging a worm, a Senko, a stick worm, however you want to call it, they're going to get shredded. You're going to go through them. I would rather not spend $9 a pack when I can spend $4.99.
That's right.
It's just, and I get that there's a different fall rate, but let me tell you a little secret. I have a Do It Molds Yamamoto Senko mold, and I make my own, and you can add your own different levels of salt. And if you don't have the equipment or the space to make your own, there is a lot of really good quality small bait makers like Death Dealer. Just mentioning them because they're a friend of the channel, but ultimately there's a lot of these guys that make really cool colors, really good quality baits, and you're still going to pay less and help a guy out that's doing it out of his garage for fun instead of paying $9. You're basically paying $1 a Senko.
That's right.
I have buddies that will be like, no, dude, you're wrong. they're the only ones that work. I can tell you right now, there's a wall behind me. For those of you listening on podcast form, there is a freaking pegboard behind me of plastics. I've got KVD, I've got Big Bite, I've got Z-Man, I've got Gambler, I've got some Death Dealer baits over there. Like, I've fished them all. And I could tell you the only difference between them that I've ever found is that if you take a June bug of a Big Bite baits, you put it next to a June bug of a Berkeley General, and you put it next to a June bug of somebody else, it's 3 different colors.
Other than that, it's just the way the bait maker perceives that color.
Yep.
And
that's really the only thing I've seen is maybe the colors are slightly different, but other than that, I know there's probably different salt content and different plastics that are used, but and Yamamoto doesn't even own Yamamoto anymore, right? Then they get sold out.
He sold everything. Yep. So that's the reason why a lot of his molds are hitting the market now.
Gotcha.
He sold everything. But going to that's a good over and underrated topic. Personal bait makers versus corporate bait makers.
Yep.
Yeah.
I will tell you,
if I need something in the pinch and I can't get it shipped to me overnight, then I'll go to the store.
I'll run the store and buy them. Yep.
Yeah.
But, I can tell you right now, I'm subscribed to a subscription box, Dark Horse Tackle. So these guys only put like small business, American small business baits in their box. They don't do the big boy subscription box where you're getting 6 cents and all that stuff. These are literally guys that are carving their own balsa. They're hand spray, they're painting it, they're air gunning it. These guys are making their own lead jigs. They're pouring their own lead. Like these small bait guys, what you don't realize until you really get into the nitty gritty of the details is, and again, I'm probably ruining any chance of ever getting a sponsor, but I'll admit right now, the fact is the guy who's doing this as a hobby project in his garage is going to give you a better quality bait than the guy who's making a run of 100,000 to make a profit. I'm sorry. It's just going to happen. You're going to get, and honestly, what's really cool about the custom bait world is that you're getting something a little bit different than everybody else has. So when you buy a bait from a company like Death Dealer, you buy a bait from one of these like eBay, like these guys right here on my hat. Like if you buy a bait that's hand painted, it's going to be slightly different than the other bait that he makes of the same color because he's not a machine, so he can't replicate that color exact. And at the end of the day, when you go fishing, sometimes the fish just want to see something slightly different, a slightly different color. Yeah. And these aren't made to mimic the industry standard color. They're made to mimic what this guy thinks a good color is. So a lot of times you get an edge by using some of these small companies.
That's right. Yeah, would I call them personal bait makers because that's what they are. They give you a personal type color.
Absolutely.
And even though you might have the color of a Yum Dinger that you like, but them companies use so much plastic, whatever they make baits out of, plastic dye, whatever.
Yep.
But he's adding like 1 to 1.5 drops again to your specified color that you're asking for, and it's a shade darker, then fish might want it more a shade darker than a translucent or a clear or a they're fish are picky just like humans are about food. Unless they're just really starving, then you're going to eat anything. But yeah, it's I really think some big company bait makers are just overrated. I really do. I just,
what's funny is they say stuff like that too. So, I mean, transparency wise, I work with. I don't get paid. I'm not sponsored by eBay Lure. He's a bait painter. He's in upstate New York and he just paints baits. I got hooked up with him because I went to a trade show and I had colors of Berkeley War Pigs that I just couldn't get anymore. I wanted this color. So I messaged him and I said, hey, dude, if I send you a picture of a bait. Can you paint this color for me? And he's like, absolutely. And that's where the benefit of having a small bait company is. Colors can't be patented. Only the design of the bait can be patented. So you can send them, hey, make me a bait that looks like this, but what I really wish is it had chartreuse on the head, or I wish it had. You can get this custom bait or this custom detail, because I will admit, dude, honestly, I work with some small bait companies, but then also, dude, probably one of my best baits this year was a Berkley War Pig. Like Berkley is.
Yeah.
You know, I use Rapalas, I use Berkley, I use Z-Man, I use them all. I'm not saying don't. I mean, I got a Mega Bass in the background. Like, I use all these baits. It's just sometimes, in my opinion, overrated, underrated kind of deal. Like, yes, there is a slight difference between like crankbaits, for example, but I have some cotton cordels that have caught me just as many fish as my Mega Bass. And it's all what you can afford. You know what I mean? It's like and there's companies that used to be really cheap. Like, honestly, one of the best crankbaits, and you're an OG guy, so you definitely know, is one of the best crankbaits I've ever used. And unfortunately, they're kind of going away, is Bandit. Dude, Bandit used to make square bills that were lights out, man, for a long time.
I might look at that one. I've never heard of Bandit.
Bandit is kind of like Bomber. They're kind of in that same category. And they make a small size square bill and medium size square bill just like Strike King does.
Yeah.
And they're significantly cheaper than your Strike King baits. That's one of the first crankbaits I ever had super success on was Bandit. And it's like a brand that you could buy at Walmart, or you could buy it. As a matter of fact, we have like weird, like almost like pop-up. Like, you go into the hardware store and they'll have a fishing section, and they'll have like some Bandit crankbaits and some hooks and stuff like that. Like,
yeah. But yeah, it's there's so much fishing stuff out here now. You know, when I was growing up, back in the late, I was born in 73, so so you figure when I was old enough to start fishing 6-7 years, early 80s, heck, you didn't hear Strike King, or I think you had the old Man's jelly worms.
Yep. There wasn't a lot of soft plastics weren't really a thing.
No, you had, I don't even know when Culprit came into existence. I don't know when that company started.
You had your Rapalas. I mean, Rapala has been around for 100 years, but I'm trying to think of who, like, and then there was obviously a lot of gimmicky stuff that came along the years too.
And I have some of their lures too. It's the Cream Company. I think they're out of Florida. You ever heard of Cream?
No.
Let me see if I can find some of their. Yeah, here they are. These are their little swim baits. They come in a pearl white, like a little perch color. So,
dude, so speaking of,
see, like little paddle tail. These things are.
Storm makes one of those too. Yep, I've seen those.
But these are made by Cream. They come like a 2-pack at Walmart.
Oh, really?
And I would put this for an underrated bait.
See, dude, I've never had success with that style of bait, and I want to, because it makes sense. It's a paddle tail with an open hook.
Yeah, but once the fish eat all this up, I guess you could tear the plastic off and just use it, because it's got a sinker built inside of it.
You know what? It's funny is if you actually think about it, which is kind of ironic, is it's basically a hover rig inside of it. That's essentially what that rig is a hover rig. Because I've ripped those apart. It's essentially a hover rig on the inside. because there's a little bit of lead wrapped around a shank and hook.
The way it looks that I can see in this white is there's a lead head, and there's a piece of lead right here that kind of gives it a
like a counterbalance.
Horn. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very similar kind of shape to a hover rig.
But yeah, I should throw these things back in my tackle box. I need to start fishing these. You could probably throw them on an Alabama rig, couldn't you?
Yeah, you could. Yeah. See, the problem is here, the Alabama rig here is not valuable because you can't have more than 2 hooks. So
you can throw as many hooks you want in the state of Georgia.
Yeah. See, here you can only use 2, and so it's not really valuable because they ultimately end up hitting the decoys every time, and then you're wasting your time.
Yeah, you're wasting your time.
Because I have a couple of them. I bought, like, Yumdinger makes a rig, or umbrella rig is what they call it. But
yeah, umbrella rig.
But the problem is I have one in my boat, but the problem is, like I said, I can only use a couple of hooks on it. So it's like you have to be really specific on where you put the hooks, or you're just never going to catch anything on it.
Yeah, But yeah, I'm gonna rig this thing up right quick and show you. That's what I'm doing, is rigging up. For people that's not seeing, I've got an umbrella rig with these cream lures that I'm for the podcast people. But yeah, cream lures, they make look them up. They got some weird looking stuff. Yeah, I can't even see in this.
Yeah, see, I'd never heard of them at all.
But yeah, I think there's some bass tours that the Alabama rig or whatever umbrella rigs are out.
Illegal. I think Bass Pro. I don't think they allow them in Bass Pro. I think Bassmasters made them illegal. See, the problem is a lot of states banned them. So, like Vermont has a lot of weird laws on like how many hooks you can use. So like you can't, what they classify as a bait and what you can have for how many hooks you can have. So instead of banning the bait, they just made the rules in a way that the bait really couldn't be used, because what are you going to do with it? But then there you go again. Vermont, they also banned the sale and use of lead under an ounce, but every tackle store sells jigs with lead, and no one stops them. So it's like no one really enforces it. So where's the line? Like you go into a lot of the local, like the Good Old Boy tackle shops, dude, and they've got like hand poured stuff that they poured themselves in a 5-gallon bucket out front that you can buy a handful for $4 or whatever. Like, so, dude, I'd try that. I would try that.
I might have to.
It might, because you're gonna get.
See,
it's gonna be a lot heavier, but
these two, I would say I wouldn't even say this is 2 ounces.
Okay.
Because this head right here is balsa wood. On this.
Oh, okay. It's not a weight. Okay.
Yeah, it's not weighted. So anything weighted would be down here.
Yeah. So actually, if anything, that might help, because that balsa is going to make that suspend more, and then those are going to help pull it down a little deeper. You'll be able to fish that a little deeper. Yeah.
I might have to try that out. That's a good idea. Glad I brought that out.
Yeah, dude, I would definitely try that because Berkley makes those kind of baits too. Yeah, Berkley makes. I have them right here. Power Bait makes them.
That's right.
Same idea.
Yes. So the head's already in there. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty much the same concept. I've had these for a long time. I got them in white. I got them in perch. I just never used them because I always thought like I was going to use them, and then I just always forget to grab them. Like that's actually why this wall is behind me. This is the stuff that like I wanted to display to myself, because what I did when I bought all these plastics, kind of getting back on topic, is overrated and underrated. We can do an overrated of the rainbow of colors that you can get for baits is overrated. You really need to stick to like 3 colors. Like, don't buy freaking rainbow colored baits. Stick with your basically 3.
Well, I'm gonna have to go. I got to throw my whites and my pinks in there.
Okay. Yeah.
Because that's what we fish in the river down here.
Yep.
So, like a pink trick worm, white trick worm, black trick worm.
Yep.
If you were gonna fish the river nearest to my house, either river, the Conecuh River's that away.
Yep.
Nogeechee River's that away, and they meet down in Savannah. So, if you had to take one bait and fish it all day long, just take you a medium rod that you can throw a weightless Texas rig trick worm on, and you'll catch fish all day long.
Yep.
Pink, white, and black.
And black, guys, pink, white works pretty much across the country, even in Vermont. Black is going to work in every body of water you fish.
June bug, green pumpkin.
Yep. And honestly, to be honest, as much as I want to believe it's different, June bug and black blue fleck is pretty much the same bait.
Yep.
Where one works, the other usually works too. It's just a personal preference thing. I have found that I have more confidence in June bug and I've caught bigger fish on June bug, but I think that's just purely because I've bought in so many of them because I think it's going to work. That I was saying this on my last podcast is I think, and it's a weird juju superstition thing, but I think your confidence transmits down that line to your bait. I think, like, if you truly believe in that color, or if you truly believe in a Coors Light can with a treble hook, it'll catch fish. It's just something about a confidence thing. I think it's how you fish it. I think you're more intentional with it. And I know a lot of guys. My dad's a perfect example. My dad is traditionally a salmon trout guy, right? And when he goes bass fishing, dude, he's got 3 different Senkos tied on. Like, that's what he does. He ties on 3 Texas rig Senkos of different colors, and he works them things to death. And he fishes them 100 different ways, and he catches fish right next to me. And I've got 8 rods behind me with a square bill, a chatterbait, a swim jig, a freaking jerk bait. Like, I've got them all.
Yeah,
but he'll go out there and tie on 3 different stick worms. And
so I'll tell you a story about stick worms. So I went fishing in the Savannah River with my uncle, and he fishes the Savannah River all the time. And before he could get one bite on like a buzz bait or a jerk or a Rapala, brokeback Rapala, I had already landed 4 fish.
Yeah.
On this bait right here.
Yep.
Fishing it weightless on a spinning reel.
Yep.
He was like, "Man, what are you doing?" I was like, "I guess I'm going to my confident bait I can catch fish on." I've caught them in the Geechee River. I've caught them in the Conecuh River on it.
It's the funniest thing because, well, it's another example is like grande bass rattlesnake worms or big bite coontail worm, for example. It's a bait that I discovered in a discount bin at a local tackle store, and I started using. Mm-hmm. And I have fished in the boat with 4 or 5 different people, have been, kayaks right next to each other, casting into the same spot, and they won't catch a damn thing on that bait. But yeah, I will throw that freaking bait in there and come out of there with big bass. It's something about confidence. Confidence is probably the most underrated bait in the fishing industry. Having experience with a bait, knowing how to work that bait, and having the knowledge and the confidence to throw it is one of the biggest things in bass fishing. I honestly still to this day say that, like, you can throw the wrong bait in the wrong situation and still catch fish if you just confidently work that bait through. If you're half-assed thinking that it's not going to work, you're going to tend to not work that bait properly. You're going to have bad cadence. You're going to not care, and you're not going to fish it as hard, so you're not going to catch as many fish on it.
Right. That's just like me. I wasn't confident in crankbaits because I just didn't like fishing them because I never caught any fish on them.
Yep.
And then I started fishing them last year and became confident in them. Now I throw a lipless crankbait. I throw a 1.5. I throw a 2.5. I'm fishing to throw a 6XD at this lake in Savannah. This guy's catching. He just caught a 9.5 out of there the other day on a 6XD.
So I will tell you, if you can do it and you can find a color that's comparable, the Berkley Dredger goes about the same depth, but it's a smaller profile as a 6XD. In my opinion, of the deep diving crankbaits, I like the Berkley Dredger better than the Strike Kings. But that's maybe a personal preference.
This is a digger, not a dredger. That's a digger.
Yep, it's similar. So they make a dredger, which is basically the same thing. So it's about the same body size as the digger.
Right.
But it's got what they did is they put a weight under the belly. So instead of using a gigantic bill to make it dive, they added a little like coin, like almost like a coin battery weight at the bottom of the bait. It keeps it square. It makes it swim like actually true. And in my opinion, again, I'm not a Berkley guy or a Rapala guy or anything like that, but I've found that I've had, of all the deep diving crankbaits, that's what I've had the most success on. To be honest, I don't use a lot of deep diving crankbaits. What I do is I count down a lipless. So I'll throw it and I'll count it down and I'll go, okay, it took 10 seconds to hit bottom. I'm in 10 feet of water. That means I'm falling a foot per second. So then I'll cast it out and I'll count it down to where I want it to go. And then I slow roll a lipless. That's how I fish a deeper bait, because I will tell you, those 6XDs, especially in a kayak, will wear you out.
Oh, I bet.
Because you could almost troll your kayak with a 6XD. Like, you literally cast that thing out and you're reeling it and you're changing the direction of your kayak while you're reeling that thing back. They drag hard.
Which I could probably throw it out and keep the motor on high and just troll with it.
Dude, so you do not even high. So what you do is, what I used to do is you throw it into the wind, which I know is bad, but you can, and then you drag it against the wind at like a slow speed, and the resistance of the current and dragging it will get super deep, because it's like power reeling, it's like speed cranking, but you're pulling against current, so you don't have to go that fast, so it has a lot of resistance and it just pulls that thing down deep.
So, but it's and like we said before, Mike, there's a lot of baits out there that are your go-to baits for any angler. Like Bass Patrol Nation said, his go-to is a trick worm on his shaky head.
Old school is old school gets right there, man.
Yeah. So, so it's just what you feel confident in versus non-confident, and I always tell people that ask me, hey, how do you go about learning a bait to fish? Is take that one rod, that one bait all day long.
Yep, absolutely.
And you just that's just like trying to teach somebody to throw a bait caster.
Yep.
Put them in the backyard with just a weight on it. Tell them to keep throwing it until they get the.
Yep. Yeah, no, I will tell you right now, this is how you learn a bait, and I'm actually going to be doing a series next year. I was talking about this on my podcast. So I'm doing a series called Nemesis Lakes and Nemesis Baits, and there's baits that's specifically for me. Jerk bait, spinner bait. There's a few baits that I just have yet to really catch fish on, and I'm going to do an entire video series where I'm going to literally dedicate a day. But what I consider a day is like 6-8 hours, right? Yeah. And I'm going to go out there with 4 rods with different colors of that same bait and just fish them. And the thing is go on YouTube, watch Binyah Outdoors, watch Southeast Georgia, watch whoever you trust and watch. They'll probably have a video talking about the basics of the technique so you understand the concept of it. Bring that bait only that bait. Understand where you're going to fish it. So if you're going to fish a crankbait and you're fishing in, lily pads, probably not a good idea. So you do have to think about where you're putting it, but put yourself in the situation that bait should work and take only that bait. Because if you can change out of that bait, you're going to do what I do with a spinnerbait. I cast it 5 or 6 times. Oh, this thing's not fucking working. I cut it off and I throw a chatterbait on. If you don't have another option, you're going to fish it. Like, dedicate yourself to it, and you'll be surprised when you do that, you'll learn. And the biggest thing is, try to remember little details when you do catch a fish on something, because what you'll learn is the bigger the variety of baits that you can have a skill set with, the better off you are, because there is some days where they will only bite a Senko. There are some days where they will only bite a scrounger head, or they'll only bite a chatterbait. You could throw everything from mega bass to cotton cordell, and it doesn't matter what brand or what it is. They're going to like one color and one bait. And if you're confident with that style of bait, once you figure out that that's what they want, then you can dial in the color and find that pattern. But sometimes I know you've probably had this too. There's days, man, where you go and on paper it's supposed to be a jerkbait bite. It should be a jerkbait bite. The conditions are a jerkbait bite, and they're biting on a Ned rig.
Well, I
it's just how it is.
I fished a lot of tournaments. You go to pre-fish, and you're catching them 6 foot suspended on a freaking 2.5.
Yep.
In black and chartreuse, and you go back tournament day to the same spot, and you're talking to them, okay, I'm gonna go back to that bait, and you don't catch a fish in the first hour. You're like, screw this, I'm going back to the shaky head.
Yep.
Or I'm going back to a trick worm, a weightless trick worm.
And that's what it is, dude. It's honestly, it's the biggest thing you can do for yourself. And this is the most cliche thing, the most gimmicky statement that I ever make on the internet, but I've said it a few times, is if you go fishing and you're having a bad day on the water, you're not catching fish, don't just go home. Stop and catch knowledge is the term I like to use. Take a bait that you're not comfortable with on a day that you're not catching fish anyways, screw it, and just learn that bait. Because at the end of the day, you're already out there. You're already rigged up. You've already got the day ahead of you. Take a bait that you maybe don't have all the confidence in the world in, and be like, okay, you know what? I've been here 3 hours. I haven't gotten a bite. I'm going to pull this jerkbait out, and I'm just going to throw this jerkbait for an hour and a half and see what happens, because you will learn techniques. And honestly, the funniest part about it is the way Daniel works a square bill is different than the way I work a square bill. Is different than my buddy Bear Fishing works a square bill. So I can teach you the basics of cast it here and fish this kind of conditions and use this kind of retrieve, but maybe I reel at a mile an hour, and Daniel reels at 3/4 of a mile an hour, and the next guy reels at 0.85 miles an hour. Like, everybody has their own little nuances, and your gear and equipment all make a difference. So we can only teach you the basics, and then experience on the water cannot be substituted.
Yeah.
It's plain and simple.
So this lure I'm fixing to show you, Mike, is a lure that I've never thrown a whole lot. In this winter, I'm gonna learn how to fish it in the wintertime, because I've heard that you can catch big fish fishing it. Is a football jig. Is a football jig head. And I've, I like slow fishing. I like fast fishing. But I watched a video on this the other day, and I kind of picked up some knowledge from the guy I watched on Bass Resource fishing it, and I'm fixing to rig this up and go fishing with it next week.
So that's so funny about the differences in people's fishing, because football jig is standard for me. Like that's I throw 2 jigs. Well, I can't say that. I throw 3 different jigs. One of them's a swim jig, but to be honest, I use an Arky pitching jig as a swim jig sometimes, because they're basically the same thing. But a football jig, the thing about a football jig too is one little trick that I've learned is a lot of guys So you can drag bottom with it, which is your standard, technique with it. One thing you can actually do is once you're done, so you feel like, okay, I've dragged this, it's getting a little too close to the boat, it's starting into like more pendulum, slow roll, reel it back. Don't burn it back to make the next cast, because it just becomes a swim jig at that point. And you'd be surprised how many times when you're slow rolling that it will actually cause a reaction strike, because you're bringing it up at an angle across those suspended bass, so it kind of looks like a crawdad swimming away from them. And you'd be surprised how many, so it gives you, I will tell you, it's less stressful as a power fisherman, because you're cast, drag it a couple times, or pitch it into wood or whatever you're doing with it, drag it a little bit, and then once you feel like, okay, I'm bored with this, it's not going to get a bite, instead of just burning it back, slow roll it, because you'd be surprised how many times fish will track it on the bottom, and then when you start swimming it back, they'll smack that thing. And it makes it more fun to fish, instead of just because honestly, you'll get tired if you're pitching and flipping all day.
Oh, I bet. Yeah.
It's burn it back and then cast it again. Burn it back, cast it again. It gets tired after a while.
Yeah. So let me get to a comment here.
Sure.
From to Loco 16. It says, you're talking about the confidence part. Just the other day, I killed it with a fly I tied off from a frayed piece of 550 cord.
Yeah.
Caught some nice gar and a few bass and even a catfish. Good deal, man.
And that's what they bite. Well, and that's the thing. I think a lot of guys get too hung up on. They think that because they spent more money on a bait, it's going to catch more fish.
Yeah,
that's not true at all. It can't be any further than true. It's all about working the bait, working the situation.
You see where this is sitting, right? Still in the box.
Yep.
I won a big bass contest with Fish Lab for $500. Yep. They had a $500 thing for their website. I won.
Yep.
So I just ordered these things just to
try them out. Yeah.
Not even try them. I thought they looked cool to sit on the shelf back here.
Okay, fair enough. It's funny because that's actually something that's actually a good overrated, underrated. I want to throw this one at you.
Yeah.
Is the big swim bait deals, like the big glide baits and stuff like that. What's your rating on that?
Man.
I always ask because I always get different answers.
Yeah. If I'm fishing a guy, I can't even tell you, Mike, because I don't fish them as much.
Yep.
Probably if I had to fish them, I would.
Okay.
But I'm not going to sit there and throw that 2.5 ounce bait for 8 hours. Heck no.
No.
Chris Zaldani does over in Lake Fork, and Sam Rayburn. No, I'm not.
Milliken. That's all he does.
Them boys are
big baits.
Like big deep sea rig they throwing out there.
So that's why I asked.
You talking about Milligan though? He catches giants on them.
He does. He destroys on them.
Giant, and I guess because he's got so much confidence in them that it's his it's his go-to. But yeah, it's.
I will say I used to be like in Vermont. I used to be like, dude, there's no way I'm throwing an 8-inch glide bait. I'm not throwing a 10. I'm not doing it. Right.
Yeah.
The funny part is I got sent some. I tried them out, and I was just trying to fish them to get footage. I wasn't even fishing them. Right. Ironically, I was using an underwater camera, and I should send you this rig, dude. It's ridiculous. It's literally a piece of plastic with a hammer tied to it. But I was fishing these baits, dude, and I was fishing 8-inch glide, like big trout glide, and dude, 6-inch smallmouth were fun. Like I was getting them on camera, tracking this thing back. A smallmouth that was smaller than the bait I was working was following it in. They weren't hitting it, but they were tracking it back in. So what kind of gave me some thought about that is the thing is it's a technique specific thing.
Yeah.
And the other thing I've learned is that I had the wrong mentality about it. So the mentality with the big swim bait guys is they're not going out there to catch 10 fish. They're going out there to catch 2 fish. They're going out there to throw that thing because the one that's going to hit it is a big bass, right?
Yeah.
But the other thing that I've learned from watching enough videos with the big swim bait, which is why I always ask about like whether people think that they're, valuable or not, is it actually becomes a search bait, because if you throw an 8-inch glide into a school of bass, they're gonna follow it back. And then know that there's a school of bass there because they're gonna go right back to where they were. They'll follow it and then they'll go back home. So if you throw that big bait, even if they don't hit it, you get the information of, okay, there was fish where I casted that. Somewhere between me and where I casted, this bass that followed it back was there. So then you throw in another bait behind it. So sometimes you can actually draw fish from a distance with those big baits and then throw another bait as a follow-up. And that's what I'm kind of learning about those. But I will tell you, on the same spectrum, will you find me going and buying a $400 swim bait? Fuck no. Not happening.
No.
I'm not going to go out and spend that money because I would bawl my eyes out if I casted bird's nest in my reel and that thing goes into the drink and I just lost $400 because I forgot to tie my knot properly or forgot to retie. Like, I'm never going to be that guy, but I will say the big baits are starting to come into my repertoire. Like, it's something that I'm going to learn next year.
Let me answer this question right quick because we've been going for about an hour and 10 minutes now, Mike. So, Loco said, any of y'all striper run this week in the Ogeechee? One of my buddies ran into them and he got some nice ones. I can vouch for this. Starting in November through February is a striper run in the Ogeechee River for you. If you want some information on it, you can shoot me an email at Daniel@SCGKBF. I can tell you where to fish at for them if you want to catch some. I couldn't tell you how big they are, but I've caught some 40, 45 pounders in the past out of there.
There's another reason why I got to come visit you, because we have them in Mass, but we can get them in Mass and on the Hudson in New York, but we don't have stripers aren't a thing here. So
but
cool if they got them in Champlain.
Oh yeah. So
can you imagine what a striper would do in Champlain, dude?
Yeah, they'll ruin a fishery for sure. Lake Lanier's got huge ones. Sinclair's got like all the Miller Lakes.
Striper and Champlain would wipe out like entire genetic lines of fish because even the salmon and the trout have just started naturally spawning. The salmon don't spawn at all. So all the salmon that are in Lake Champlain are stocked.
Oh wow.
They can't breed in there anymore. There's something about, I can't remember, there's some weird consistency or something that's wrong, but basically all the salmon are, so they would wipe out the striper would kill the salmon population because they would eat up all the food.
Yeah. So, hey, we've been going for about an hour and 13 minutes now, folks. So we're not going to hold you any longer on the cast. We can sit here all night talk about over and unders, but
absolutely.
Hope everyone has a great Thanksgiving. Be safe in your travels. Have fun with your family. Enjoy your family time. Most tournament scenes are already on the download now. They'll start back up in January and February. But we'll be looking for some tournament stuff coming from SCG KBF. We've got some stuff already up on Tourney X, our Weekend Warrior stuff, our River Series, our Kayak Online Series will start, I think, in March. Actually, it'll start in March. And then where me and Mike's going to discuss about some other things for next year behind the scenes to get these northern guys situated. But once again, thank you for joining the Main Contain Fishing Podcast. Make sure you go over and like the video, subscribe to our channels, comment, leave comments. You can watch these videos later. For the Spotify people, it'll be up on Monday. And you can leave a comment on there as well. If you need any information from myself, you can reach me at Daniel@scgkbf.com. Our next podcast will be November 30th. And we will have a guest, Mr. Dwayne Whaley from Tourney X will be on the show with us to discuss some things that's going on with his platform off Tourney X. Great guy. Just got off the phone with him this afternoon on a little call that he wanted me to call him about. But other than that, thank you for watching and fish on.